Hey, what are you doing? Open up. Why don't you just stay here for a while? I was locked in the basement by my husband's child, Ethan. I tried to open the basement door many times, but it wouldn't budge. Originally, I had been in an accident and was using an electric wheelchair. So, I couldn't move well. It's cold. Well, of course. It's 28 degrees right now. Why are you doing this? Then, Ethan started laughing loudly. I've been irritated with you for a long time. What? Pretending to be a mother. You might as well become a mummy staying in a place like this, right? What's wrong with you? We're going on a trip for 3 nights and 4 days. So, try your best until we get back. Please, let me out of here. My cries of anguish did not reach Ethan. Only the sound of his footsteps fading away echoed. I had no choice but to despair, unable to do anything. 4 days after being locked up, Ethan returned from his trip. What is this? Realizing something was terribly wrong, he hurried to the basement. Tentatively, when Ethan looked into the basement, he was met with a shocking scene. While Ethan stood frozen, a grand act of revenge began. My name is Kim, and I work as a salesperson at a cosmetics company. I got married when I was 30. What was different about this marriage was that my husband, Steve, had a child from his former marriage. My parents opposed our marriage because of this. Marrying someone with a child will surely bring hardships. Your father is right. But I want to marry him. I pleaded for hours. Initially, they wouldn't agree, but I didn't give up, and eventually, they consented to the marriage. If you're that determined, I won't stop you. Thanks, Dad. The reason I chose Steve, who had a child, was because I felt very comfortable with him. From the first day we met, we shared common hobbies, such as outdoor activities, and got along well. Our meeting was at a bar I frequently visited. By chance, we sat next to each other and ordered the same drink, which led to a casual conversation. After seeing each other several times, we exchanged contact information. Soon after, my husband contacted me, and we went out for a meal. You brought a child? Actually, he's my child. Huh? Your child? His name is Ethan, and he's turning 10 this year. I see. I was at a loss for words, not knowing how to respond. Sensing this, my husband said something surprising. There's a reason I brought my son today, is because I'm serious about our relationship. I want to marry you someday. I had thought about dating, but I hadn't imagined it would lead to marriage. Being told this with a serious face, we started dating. Since then, we often went out together as 3. It seems like Ethan has warmed up to you. I hope so. Let's ask him. Ethan, come here for a second. What is it, Dad? Would you be happy if Kim became your mom? After a moment's pause, he smiled. I would be very happy. See? That's what he says. Yeah. I was incredibly happy, though a bit embarrassed. At this time, we had been dating for about half a year. A week later, I received a formal proposal and we got married. After the marriage, the 3 of us rented a detached house. Looking up at our new home, I imagined a happy family life ahead. However, our life gradually began to take a strange turn. Although my relationship with the son had been good, he suddenly became cold towards me. I'm sorry, but it looks like I'll have to go on more business trips. Business trips? Is it long? Well, I don't think so, but I might be away from home more often. Although my relationship with Ethan had been good before the marriage, I was anxious about being left alone with him so soon after getting married. And then, one morning, as the days of spending time alone with Ethan increased, something happened. What's wrong? Aren't you going to eat? I don't want any. After that, he wouldn't even respond when spoken to. Suddenly finding myself in this situation made me wonder if I had done something wrong. So I decided to talk to my husband, who had just returned from a business trip. Aren't you worrying too much? It's sudden. If I did something wrong, I want to apologize. But you don't remember doing anything, right? Yes, but worrying too much might just make things weirder.
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I realized something. Recently, Ethan had been taking piano lessons, at my husband's suggestion. It turns out, my husband had also learned piano when he was in elementary school. He had told me that working with your hands is good for the brain. See you next week, Rebecca. Yes. See you then.
Yeah.
He was always smiling when it came to his piano teacher, Rebecca. Even observing his behavior recently, he seemed happiest when he was with her. Why? When my husband was home, Ethan would talk to me casually. But as soon as Steve went on a business trip, Ethan stopped talking to me. Even when he was at home, he would only come out of his room for meals and baths. It was as if he didn't hear me at all when I spoke to him. I tried talking to my husband again, but there was no sign that our relationship was improving. Life went on like this, and before I knew it, Ethan had grown up and gone to college. What should we do now? About Ethan? Yes. Before I knew it, we've gotten to this point. He's an adult now, not a child anymore. But still. My husband's point was to not worry too much about it. Of course, Ethan would eventually leave home and become independent. But I still wanted to improve our relationship. However, discussions with my husband always ended inconclusively. Unable to understand why Ethan might hate me, I decided to ask him directly. Is there something troubling you? Huh? Why are you asking me this all of a sudden? We haven't been talking much lately, and I thought maybe something happened. Ethan sighed heavily and answered reluctantly. Can you just not talk to me? I don't have anything to say to you. You don't have to say things like that. Then, Ethan said something shocking. I've hated you ever since I first met you. What? I don't like the way you look down on people. I was at a loss for words after being spoken to so harshly. Then, my husband, noticing something was wrong, came over. What's going on here? Nothing. That can't be true. What did you say to your mom? I just said I hate her. What's wrong with that? You said what? Apologize to your mom. My husband spoke sternly, trying to admonish Ethan. However, Ethan had already begun to show defiance even towards his father. Why should I? Are you being deceived by her? What are you saying? That's ridiculous. Ethan stood his ground and resisted. If you're going to say that, I'll just leave. That's fine, right? Hey, where are you going? Wait. Ethan left the house. This incident only made his rebellion escalate further. Aren't you going to chase after him? It's okay. Let's just leave him be for now. He'll come back eventually. No matter how harshly he spoke to me, Ethan was still our dear son. I wanted to chase after him, but I chose to wait, believing he would return soon. However, Ethan did not come back the next night. Unable to stay put, I went outside. I thought to myself, he couldn't possibly be near the house. Regretting my impulsiveness for coming out without a plan, I then saw Ethan emerging from a house in front of me. I quickly hid behind a tree. What is he doing here? I stayed hidden until Ethan disappeared into the darkness. When I checked the house he came out of, it turned out to be the piano school he had attended years ago. It was night, but unknowingly, I had come to a familiar road. It had been years since I last visited here. However, I couldn't understand why Ethan had come out of there. Where have you been? I hurried back home and questioned Ethan. I thought I saw you around the piano school earlier. Piano? At that moment, his voice seemed to falter a bit. What were you doing? Why would I go to Rebecca's? That response made me realize I hadn't mistaken him for someone else. My son stopped playing the piano when he graduated from elementary school. Given that he referred to her name instead of as a teacher, it was clear they hadn't met just yesterday or today. I see. Seemingly annoyed, he muttered under his breath. Just shut up, will you? Even though it was already quite difficult for me mentally, his words still shocked me. Then, as if on cue, my husband came home. As soon as Ethan realized his father was home, he retreated to his room. When Steve entered the living room, he looked somewhat exasperated. Did he say something to you again? Huh? You can tell? I can tell just by looking at your face. So, what happened? I told my husband about what Ethan had said to me earlier. Steve then placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and spoke kindly to me. I'm truly sorry. Why are you apologizing? It's partly my fault for not being able to listen properly today. I've been away from home on business trips too often. But it still hurts when he says things like that. As I murmured this, Steve was about to head to Ethan's room. Wait a minute. I grabbed his arm to stop him. Why stop me? I need to talk to him. Just listen. I stopped him because I remembered something I had forgotten to mention. It was about Ethan coming out of the piano school. It wasn't a mistake, and when I asked him about it, he called her by name. Piano? He used to go to lessons around elementary school, right? Yes. I don't know when it started, but they seem to get along well. But why would he? I can't figure out why. That's why I think we should just watch the situation for a bit. Okay, if you say so. I desperately wanted to know the reason. Maybe it was the cause of his harsh attitude towards me. My wish was to resolve this issue and improve our relationship with Ethan. I really want to do something about it. Right. I'll help too. Let's work on this together.
Yeah.
Though I said this to my husband, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story, leading me to investigate Rebecca. For now, we decided to simply observe Ethan. But when things go wrong, they really seem to spiral. On my way home from work, disaster struck. I was hit by a car that ran a red light while I was crossing the street. Are you okay? Sorry for this to happen. What are you talking about? I'm just glad you're safe. But my legs. I had sustained a severe back injury, resulting in spinal cord damage that left me unable to move my legs. So, you mean you can't walk anymore? I nodded silently. I would end up being hospitalized for about half a year. And with you so busy at work for this to happen. It's not your fault, Kim. But you have a business trip tomorrow, right? I'll be fine, you should go home and prepare. That's true, but I'm really okay. All right. Call me if anything happens. My husband left the room. I bit my lip to stop myself from crying. The next day, Ethan came to visit me in the hospital. How are you feeling? I can't move my legs, but other than that, I'm okay. Then Ethan smirked unpleasantly. Can't walk, huh? Now you're completely useless. You don't have to say that. Maybe Dad will divorce you now. I wouldn't mind. His verbal abuse continued. Without retorting, I absorbed his words like a punching bag. Finally, as if satisfied, Ethan turned to leave the room. Just before exiting, he looked back and said, "Well, do your best. I'm not into caregiving, you know." All I could do was watch his back as he left. Alone in the hospital room, I lay down and secretly shed tears. I had never felt such pain in my life before. Then, as if by fate, my husband came to visit. I have something important to discuss today. Important? I braced myself. Ethan's words lingered in my mind, making me fear that Steve might bring up divorce. However, what he said next completely took me by surprise. Actually, I've been thinking about buying a new house. Our current one isn't wheelchair accessible, and I know it's been tough for you, right? That might be true, but to go to such lengths for me. It's okay. Of course, there was something that worried me. It was about Ethan. But what will Ethan say? I mentioned it to him, but he seemed disinterested. We hardly talk these days. I see. During my hospital stay, Steve had been looking for a new house. It was true that our old home was inconvenient now that I was in a wheelchair. Building a new house would have taken too much time. By the time Steve visited me 2 weeks later, he had already purchased a house. I've already bought the house. Already? Found a great model house in a nice location. I decided on the spot. All this for me. I just want you to live as comfortably as possible. Thank you so much. A surge of emotions welled up inside me. Upon being discharged and arriving at our new home, I was amazed. It was more magnificent than I had imagined. Nice house, isn't it? Yes, it's wonderful. And this house even has a basement. A basement too. But there was more to be surprised about. Oh right, there was something else. Saying that, Steve went to the back of the room and returned. Could it be? Yes, this is an electric wheelchair. Oh my God. With this, you can move around more freely, right? I can't thank you enough. I did this on my own initiative. I hoped this would lessen the burden on my husband. Though I wouldn't suddenly be able to do everything. I was determined to try and even go outside. From that day on, I started doing things for myself. Ethan seemed displeased to see me becoming more active. Move out of the way. You're such a nuisance. Then, he kicked my wheelchair. That's dangerous. Don't be here if you can't do anything. I was just trying to lessen the burden. As if that changes anything? You don't have to be so cruel. Your existence itself is a burden, so what's the point? I tried to return to my room, but he blocked my way. Where do you think you're going? Just back to my room. Move out of the way. We're not done talking. I have nothing more to say. I had hoped for a relationship improvement, but perhaps this was the end. I had reached my limit. Running away? Think what you want. It's fine by me. Why did Dad even marry someone like you? Then, he kicked my wheelchair again and returned to his room upstairs. For a while, he stopped talking to me. This silence was somewhat a relief. Sorry, but I've got another business trip. Understood. I'm sorry, especially since we haven't resolved things with Ethan. It's okay. I'll call if anything happens. As Steve left for his trip, life with Ethan resumed. With Steve gone, Ethan often stayed out. Now, I found myself anxious about when he would return. However, Ethan didn't come home until after I had gone to bed that night. The next morning, I woke to loud noises coming from upstairs. It seemed he had returned while I was asleep, but there was no sign of him leaving his room. Well, time to get to work today. I was determined. After becoming disabled, I thought I'd have to quit my job. But I was recognized for my previous work and told I could continue working remotely. I turned on my computer to start working and realized something was missing, the mouse. Where did I put it? I remembered that computer peripherals were stored in the basement. Given my son's current attitude, asking him for help seemed futile, so I decided to go myself. The electric wheelchair really does make things easier. Though reluctant, I didn't want to postpone it and headed to the basement. The access was through a door behind the staircase. Slowly descending the ramp, I reached for a box in the back. As I placed the box on my lap to return upstairs, I heard someone coming down the stairs. Thinking Ethan had finally woken up, I saw him coming down the ramp. "What are you doing down here?" "Just looking for something." A part of me felt a little happy, thinking he came to help. "Then, I'll help you." Saying that, he closed the door. Shocked, I froze for a moment but quickly realized this was bad. Not only was I trapped, but it was also freezing. Checking the wall-mounted thermometer, it read 28 degrees. "What are you doing?" "Open up." "Huh? Why don't you stay down here for a while?" No matter how much I tried, the basement door wouldn't budge. Having been in an accident, I was using an electric wheelchair, making any movement difficult. "It's cold." "Well, of course. It's 28 degrees right now." "Why are you doing this?" Then, Ethan started laughing loudly. "I've been irritated by you for a long time." "What?" "Pretending to be a mother. You might as well become a mummy staying in a place like this, right?" "What are you thinking? We're going on a trip for 3 nights and 4 days. So, try your best until we get back. Please, let me out." "All right." After waiting for a while, Ethan came back with something in his hand. The door cracked open slightly, and through the gap, he threw in 2 bags of snacks and a bottle of water. "You expect me to survive on this? That should be more than enough." "Well, this is."
Goodbye.
"For now. Just open it." My cries of anguish didn't reach my son. All I could hear were his footsteps fading away. I was left with no choice but to despair. It seemed he wasn't seriously intending to endanger my life. I had to figure out how to survive the next 4 days. I need to find a way to stay warm. I desperately searched for anything useful. After rummaging through cardboard boxes, I found an old blanket. With nothing else available, I covered myself with it to withstand the cold. Without any means to call for help, the 4 days passed, and Ethan returned from his trip. A grand act of revenge was about to begin. I secretly watched Ethan's movements. "Now, what will you do?" As Ethan headed towards the basement and cautiously opened the door. "What is this?" The stench was so strong, it could be detected from afar. In a panic, he entered. "You've got to be kidding. She died." I shouldn't have listened to them. At the back of the basement was something wrapped in a blanket. Ethan probably thought it was me. However, it was a trap set by me and another person. "What are you doing there?" Ethan quickly turned around. "Why are you here?" "Why?" "What do you mean why?" "Don't mess with me. That's my line. You shouldn't do such things without being prepared for the consequences." "What? Are you mocking me?" Just as Ethan approached me. I never thought it would come to this. "Dad, why are you here? You were supposed to be on a business trip." "I came back because I couldn't get in touch. Then I found out she was trapped in the basement. Indeed, I was rescued by my husband's efforts. It was just yesterday that I was freed from the basement." To deceive Ethan, my husband and I placed kitchen waste in a bag to mimic the appearance of decay, and used a blanket to resemble me. The plan was a complete success. "So, who is this person you mentioned?" "Huh? Did I say something like that? Don't play dumb. I really don't know what you're talking about." That's when I had a realization. Could it be Rebecca? Ethan stepped back. It was clear I had hit the nail on the head. "You did mention coming out of the piano school before, right?" "Yes." "They must have been sneaking around behind our backs." "Then let's verify it." "Huh? You know her contact information, right?" Let's invite her over. Wait a minute. Just call her. Ethan contacted Rebecca. Soon after, the doorbell rang. Ethan went to greet her, and they both headed to the basement together. Now, let's hear the explanation. It was natural for me not to meet my eyes in such an awkward situation. I just wanted Dad to be happy. What's so good about her? You really don't understand anything. What do you mean? I chose Kim because she accepted me for who I am. But Rebecca would be no different, right? Then why go through all this? You think I'd fall for someone like that? I thought we should hear it straight from her. Wait. Since she's here, let's ask Rebecca. She was taken aback, clearly not expecting to be the focus. All eyes were on her. I was using Ethan. I only said to scare her a bit. I never thought it would lead to locking her in a basement. I had heard some things about Rebecca when Ethan was attending piano lessons. It seems she had been inviting him out for meals several times even before I met him. Despite his rejections. After we got married, he started to refuse rides to and from the lessons. That's why I decided to drive him, partly to keep an eye on him. Indeed, I was using Ethan. But I never wanted to be with him. What? I just couldn't stand seeing the person I liked happy. So, you saying you wanted to be with Dad was? I'm sorry. That was a lie. Then, I remembered something I had looked into before. It wouldn't have worked out anyway. What do you mean? Because Rebecca is married. That's a lie. Is that right? Rebecca nodded silently. Ethan couldn't have known. Rebecca's husband was also working away from home. Then, what was all this for? Seeing Ethan's dejected figure, I whispered something to my husband. I see. That makes sense. What are you talking about? You liked Rebecca, didn't you? What? Ethan looked up quickly after initially looking down. No, that's not it. Thinking about it, there were many odd things. You said it was for my sake, but there were other ways to handle this. Rebecca, you knew about Ethan's feelings, right? Yes. It's such a pity. You were just used for revenge. After all this time, I was doing it for Rebecca. Ethan eventually sat down, overwhelmed. Steve placed a hand on his shoulder, and Ethan's expression seemed to soften a bit. Perhaps he was hoping for some sympathy. We, as parents, had decided to be strict with our son for his own good. It's regrettable, but you're an adult. Being deceived doesn't excuse your actions. So, leave this house immediately. Wait. Isn't that too harsh? Harsh? Consider what you've done before saying that. For someone like her. I had no intention of holding back either. What you did to me could be considered kidnapping. There was a risk to my life. That's why you panicked, right? Cam is right. Do you think we can live with someone dangerous like that? Ethan might have thought it was a minor act, but it was a serious crime. It was a sufficient reason to kick him out. Then let's give him a choice. Either we call the police now, or he leaves this house. That's a good idea. So, what's it going to be? Giving Ethan a choice was deliberate, but he never really had an option. I understand. I'll leave. All right. I will still pay for your tuition until you graduate. You'll have to figure out the rest on your own. And don't ever come back to this house. Isn't that a bit too much? Would you prefer to be reported? Hearing that, Ethan looked down and fell silent again. Rebecca. What should I do now? He was seeking help from Rebecca. But her demeanor was no longer quiet, anger towards Ethan was palpable. You really screwed things up. Who asked you to go this far? I never thought you were this foolish. But, I just did what you said. Did what I said? I never told you to commit a crime. What's that supposed to mean? You deceived me first. A pointless argument unfolded before us. If you want to fight, do it outside. It's just a nuisance here. Exactly. If you two continue to cause a disturbance, I'll really call the police. With my intervention, the two of them regained some composure and left the house, continuing their argument. Part of me wondered if kicking Ethan out was too harsh. But what Ethan did to me was a crime. He needs to understand the gravity of his actions and live a righteous life. This was the right thing to do, wasn't it? Yes. You don't need to worry about it, Kim. But still, it's okay. If we coddle him, he'll never truly grow up. You're right. After leaving the house, my son started living alone in an apartment. As my husband had promised, we continued to pay for his tuition. But he was earning his living expenses on his own. Apparently, one part-time job wasn't enough, so he seems to be juggling several jobs. There was one time when he called me. I'm sorry for everything. Could you lend me some money? Why should I do that? You chose to leave this home. So, it's like that, huh? What are you talking about? It's always been about Dad, not me, right? If that's how you feel, don't bother calling me again. Like I'd ever contact you again. He hung up. Ethan was turning 20 this year, missing out on what should be the best time of his life. He must accept the consequences of his actions as his punishment. Rebecca moved away quietly, and now her whereabouts are unknown. Finally, things have settled down. Yes. Let's look forward to our future together. Thus, life for just the two of us began, and surely, happiness will continue to follow.